we could introduce all of them to you, but for technical simplicity, we'll just wait until we get back together in person sometime, hopefully there in early 2021. So I am able to introduce Kathy Merrick, who is one of the members of the executive committee who will give us tonight's announcements.
Good evening, everyone. Just a few announcements. I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here, but just a few words about voting. I'm sure most of you have already actually voted, but if you have any questions at all, go to movotesafe.org or 314-652-3929. And you can go to that website or that phone number, even on election day. That's movotesafe.org. And also, I want to remind most of us in West County or Chesterfield that the satellites open up this week on Thursday, October 22nd. And at the satellite in Chesterfield, which is at 82 Clarkson at the Clarkson Wilson Center, it is open starting the 22nd for either dropping off your completed absentee ballot or for voting absentee in person. And the Monday through Friday hours after the 22nd are 8 to 4:30 and Saturdays 9 to 1. And the day before election, November 2nd, it's 8 to 5 o'clock. And so also just a couple of other things, that this year in St. Louis County, you can vote. If you vote in person, you can vote at any polling place. Your actual polling place may have changed, but you can vote at your assigned one or at any polling place. And if you mailed your ballot in and you track it online, if it says received, I want to assure you that received means it's been received with no problems. So you're good to go. A couple of more quick things. We do still have some signs. If you are needing a Biden or a Shoup or a Kennedy or a Page or a No on 3 sign, you can contact Kathy Paulsmeyer, and her email is cpaulsmeyer, that's Meyer, M-E-Y-E-R, Paulsmeyer @gmail.com, or you can give her a call at 636-778-9692. And just as another push, I'd like to push everyone to volunteer for your favorite candidate. It's now or never, election 3 weeks from today. So pick your favorite candidate or issue and get out there and do everything you can to help them. I'd like to put in a special plug for the No on 3 campaign, as all the candidates, but they especially could use phone banking volunteers. They have 4 training and phone banking sessions per week, Monday, Wednesday, Thursdays, and Saturdays. And you can just go to cleanmissouri.org/volunteer and you can sign up right there. They'd love to have you, because let's face it, if we don't get that gerrymandering taken care of, a lot of our other efforts aren't going to go as well. So please consider them. And then also, we'd like to encourage all of our current members of Chesterfield Township Dems to renew their memberships on our website, and that is chesterfielddemocrats.org. And also, if you're not a member, you can go to the website and join initially. And also, we will continue to do these programs. In fact, I forgot to tell you about our future programs. I will. We have given about $1,000 to candidates and causes during this election cycle. So please know that your dues money is put to very good use. And let me go back that we do have some future programs coming up. November 10th, which should be an interesting day. Wish we knew how we were going to feel that day. Charles Jaco, renowned author and journalist, will be talking to us about whatever the status of the election is on that day. And then that'll be on November 10th, Tuesday, November 10th. And then we will have no meeting in December. And then in January, Joan Kelly Horn, who was our Congresswoman in the 2nd District from 91 to 93, she will be speaking to us on Tuesday, January 12th. So just remember, when we look at those polls, we're starting to feel good, but you can look at the polls to help you sleep. But then when you wake up in the morning, get busy working harder than you ever have to get Democrats elected. So I'm going to give it back to Mike to introduce our speakers.
Thank you, Kathy. Just a couple of quick notations as we get started here. We're going to, first of all, have Elisa Kennedy do a short presentation and introduce herself to you, and then Rich Feinerman. I'm not going to try and do an introduction. They are fully capable of introducing themselves and will probably do a much better job than I will, and you'd rather hear from them than me anyway. We will, after both presentations, we will have an open question and answer session for each of the, you can send in questions either using the raised hand function, or you can submit it using the question and answer function. If you submit it through the question and answer function, I will ask the question on your behalf. If you use the raised hand function, I will turn it over to you and you'll be able to ask the candidate your question directly. The chat function is only on private tonight, so anything that you put on the chat function, you can send to another attendee, but it will not go on the public board for everybody to see. So any questions you want to ask tonight, either use the raised hand function or the Q&A function. And so with that, I know you're anxious to hear from the candidates, so I will turn it over to Alicia to start tonight's program.
Hello there. Hi, this is Alicia Kennedy. I am the Democratic nominee for Missouri Lieutenant Governor. I'm really excited to be able to fellowship with you guys. This has been a very interesting political process because we haven't been doing typical retail politicking, meaning boots on ground, touching you guys, being able to get a real sense of the people we're going to be representing, and you get a sense of who wants to represent you. So I missed that aspect of campaigning this cycle. But guess what? If we get good leadership in position that is going to apply the best practices to help us mitigate community spread, that is going to require us to mask up to keep everybody safe, the faster we're going to get through this, the faster our economy is going to recover, and the kids can get back into school and things can kind of settle out a little bit. But all that being said, I'm looking forward to the chance to get to talk to you guys tonight about the role of Lieutenant Governor, about who I am, and what type of leadership I'll bring to the statewide ticket. And how we can support each other to make sure we have a blue wave on November the 3rd.
Is there anything else you want to say at this time, Alicia?
I didn't know if I was at time or not, but I can keep going.
Oh, you have like 10 to 12, 15 minutes. Feel free to.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll keep going. So I do so many of these.
This is your chance to really connect with the people since you can't be boots on the ground.
Okay. So I do so many of these. The rules change based on who's doing the platform. So I'm very thankful to Mike and his team to allow us enough time to be able to have honest conversations. So when I got into this race, well, when I was approached to get into this race, I was like, not really excited about it because I wasn't really clear on what the lieutenant governor did. I had served in local politics. I'm most passionate about those issues that affect people's everyday lives and really wanted to stay close to those things. But as I took the time to learn more about the role of lieutenant governor and what that position should be doing, it helped me recognize that it was another opportunity for me to work on those things that matter to most Missourians in a broader scale. Things like education, early childhood education in particular, housing, affordable housing, economic development in cities and rural communities as well. There's a rural economic development committee at the state level. Did you know that? As far as dealing with public financing and catalytic development across the state, these are things that really transform communities, that make impact in lives and stabilize families. One of the most notable parts of the lieutenant governor by state statute, the lieutenant governor has the responsibility of being the chief advocate for veterans and seniors across the state of Missouri. That means a lot to me because many of the people I represented in those neighborhoods were little old ladies. And those folks, when I tell you, they were on fire, very engaged, and wanted real change in their communities. And so when they heard that I was going to be considering to step into this role, they rolled up their sleeves, wrote their checks, and they've been right behind me. So there is so much opportunity available for us at this state level to be able to make impact, real impact. We talk about violent crime. I believe the way for us to address violent crime is by creating opportunities, providing solutions to address substance abuse and mental health issues, and as well as providing stronger supports in education and economic mobility. Those are things the Lieutenant Governor works on. We have to tie these matters together. Economic development and investing in human development are hand in hand. That is going to be the key to our economic recovery as we move forward from COVID-19, because people have lost jobs. They're going to need to be reskilled. We're going to have to find ways to support small businesses, and we're going to have to make sure we have a workforce to be able to place in these growth industries. And some people are going to have to be retooled and retrained. Some people are going to want to be entrepreneurs, and how are we going to support their business endeavors? And some kids are going to have to try to catch up with the learning gap that they already had. And we have to be able to support those endeavors as well. So as your Lieutenant Governor, I'm not only concerned about business, I'm not only concerned about economic development, I'm most concerned about you. And I'm looking forward to the opportunity to connect with you on the individual level as we go forward and hearing your immediate concerns and how I can be supportive as we go forward through November the 3rd.
Wonderful. Thank you. Appreciate that. And so I'm going to pass it over to our candidate for Attorney General and let him have 10 or 15 minutes here, and then we will open it up to question and answer.
Well, thank you, Mike. Hi, everybody. Good to see you. I'm actually on the road today in Alicia's backyard in Kansas City. But as I think many of you know, I actually grew up just outside Chesterfield in Wildwood, Missouri. I'm a proud graduate of Lafayette High School, and I'm very privileged and honored to be the Democratic nominee for Missouri Attorney General. My name is Rich Finneran, and for those of you who I haven't had the chance to meet, I can't see everybody who's here with the way this setup is tonight. So for those of you who don't know much about me, as I said, I grew up in West County, St. Louis, went away for college, but came back to law school at WashU, and graduated from law school, and then spent my entire career practicing law in the city of St. Louis. And most of that time, I worked as a federal prosecutor. From 2010 to 2017, I was a assistant U.S. attorney in the Eastern District of Missouri, and I handled mostly large-scale white-collar fraud cases. During my time as a AUSA, I actually handled the two largest criminal fraud cases in the history of our state. One of those was a $435 million insurance fraud case that affected more than 70,000 people across 16 different states. It was a terrible scam that preyed on people in their time of most desperate need as they were planning for a loved one's final expenses. This company had promised people that they were going to take care of the money that they'd been handed so that people's funerals could be paid for after they passed away. And instead of doing what they promised, they took that money and ran off with it. And so I was very proud as a federal prosecutor to use my skills as a lawyer to help prosecute that case. We took several corporate executives and charged them, tried one of those individuals and received large sentences against all of them, and did justice in that case for the people of Missouri and recovered millions, as I said, for people here and all across the country. I did that job from 2010 to 2017, and even when I was growing up as a kid out in West County, I thought that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a prosecutor my whole career. And it was what I thought I'd be doing for the rest of my life. In fact, I actually, the other day, I got to do an interview with the high school newspaper at Lafayette. Somehow reached out to me and did an interview with me. It was maybe the most enjoyable interview I've had this entire campaign. And they asked me, when did you know that you wanted to be doing this kind of thing, getting into politics or being a prosecutor? And I said, well, this is stuff I was interested in from the time that I was a kid. But once I became a prosecutor, I thought that was what I was going to be doing for the rest of my life because I loved it so much. It gave me an opportunity and a platform to really make a big difference in my community in St. Louis. But after the 2016 election, like a lot of you, I started questioning what I could do that could be more impactful after the devastating losses that we all faced in the 2016 election. I don't want to bring back sore memories, but you all remember what it was like that morning after, wondering what the heck just happened. How did we have the presidential election go the way it did? How did we lose all of these statewide offices? We thought we were so close, and yet we turned out that we were so far away. And that's what motivated me to leave the U.S. Attorney's Office and get re-engaged. And the first thing I did was go to work for one of my former students. I also teach on the side at WashU Law School, where I graduated from. And one of my former students, Court Van Osteren, decided he was going to run for Congress. Another of my former students, Claire Botnick, said that she was going to run his campaign. And I said, well, what can I do to help? And so I got really, really involved with Court's campaign at a high level. And as you all know, we did an amazing thing back in that last cycle in 2018. We took a district that had been a 25-point Republican district for the last 3 cycles, and which frankly had been drawn and gerrymandered to make it so that Ann Wagner could not lose. And we made it a 4-point district in just 1 cycle. And it showed me what, with hard work and dedication and people who really care about turning things around our community, how quickly we could make some of that change happen. And now we're seeing the same exact thing happening at the statewide level. It's not just me. All of our statewide candidates have done an amazing job this cycle, working together, not getting in each other's way, but instead combining our forces, combining our energies in order to be able to bring change to this state. And, you know, Alicia mentioned people, you know, asking her to get in the race. I was one of those people. I went out to Kansas City in March, and I had the opportunity to meet Alicia when she was thinking about it. And I told her, listen, we need you in this race. We need people of your character and your conviction and your experience to help us. We have such a big fight ahead of us. And I'm so proud to be running alongside her and our other statewide candidates, and so amazed that we're so much further along than I thought we'd be just 4 years later, thanks to the work that so many of you I know are doing, and that the statewide candidates and candidates up and down the ballot have been doing. But why did I decide to run for Attorney General? Well, it came down to seeing what our current Attorney General had decided to do with the job. Usually at this point, if you could all raise your hands, I'd ask if anybody asked for, actually voted for my opponent, Eric Schmidt, but that would just be a trick question because none of us voted for him to be Attorney General. He was handpicked by Mike Parson to fill the Attorney General's office once Josh Hawley graduated to the Senate after saying that he was in the Attorney General's office for the long haul. And so as a result, what we have today is an unelected Attorney General who's appointed by our unelected governor, who's been using the court system to pursue policies that none of us here voted for and that, frankly, none of us really want. And the best example of that is the one that really got me into this race, and that is his crusade against the Affordable Care Act. I've been talking about this issue now for more than a year, but a lot of people are only starting to realize how big a deal this is after the untimely and very unfortunate passing of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. As you probably all, if you've been watching any of these confirmation hearings, you see us all asking the nominee what her opinion is about the Affordable Care Act. The only reason those questions are even before the Supreme Court is because Eric Schmidt and other Republican attorneys general have brought a case challenging the constitutionality of the Affordable Care Act that's going to be heard in the Supreme Court later this year. And if he wins that lawsuit, it will mean an end to so many of the gains that we made when the Affordable Care Act was passed back in 2010. It would mean that those of us who have children under the age of 26, there'd be no guarantee that they could stay on our insurance. For those of us who are senior citizens, it would mean higher prescription drug costs for people who are on Medicare. It would also mean an end to guaranteed coverage for pre-existing conditions. And I know that probably everybody watching tonight either themselves has or knows someone who's close to them who has a pre-existing condition. If Eric Schmidt wins this lawsuit, then people like that could be kicked off of their insurance policies. And perhaps most offensively, considering the vote we all just took in August, if Eric Schmidt wins this lawsuit, then it means that we will actually not just lose Medicaid expansion here in Missouri, but all across the country. And the vote that we just took to bring our tax dollars back from Washington to start saving our rural hospitals and helping working families get the health care they need will literally go away. We'll go back to how things were in 2010 when insurance companies could kick you off your insurance just because you got sick. And that's somehow what Eric Schmidt thinks that his job is as Attorney General, to spend our tax dollars doing that kind of lawsuit. That's not the kind of Attorney General I want to be. I believe the Attorney General's job is to protect the people of the state of Missouri. So anytime a legal issue comes before the Attorney General's office, the first question that I'm going to ask is, well, what is this going to do to protect the people of the state of Missouri? And when it comes to this lawsuit, I don't think there's any good answer that Eric Schmitt can give to that question, which is why he was probably why he was a no-show for our first scheduled debate and has not responded to our request to schedule 2 more debates, because I think he knows he doesn't have actually a good argument to make when it comes to this very, very important issue to so many people that are watching tonight and so many other people all across the state. So Eric Schmitt doesn't think that his job is just to look out and protect people in Missouri. He thinks that it's his job to try to bring a lawsuit to try to take away healthcare protections, but that's not his job. It's also not his job to get into fights with local prosecutors like Circuit Attorney Gardner or County Prosecutor Wesley Bell about who gets to handle a criminal case. That's not Eric Schmitt's job. It's also not Eric Schmitt's job to bring a lawsuit against the government of China over the coronavirus pandemic, when he should be looking down the street to the governor's mansion and trying to get some accountability out of our leadership in Jefferson City for their failures when it comes to the crisis. But Eric Schmitt thinks that all those things are his job. And that's why come November 3rd, we've got to make sure that it's not his job anymore to be the Attorney General of our state. You know, I have been focused on this race now for more than a year, and we are so excited about the opportunity that we have in front of us. Not just my race, as I said, but all the statewide candidates who worked together to really put together, I think, a very exciting slate of candidates, all of whom are energetic, who are running real campaigns, trying to really reach out to voters. But as Alicia, I know often says, we can't do it alone. We're just 5 people. We need all of you to help us. And so one thing that I know that she and I will both ask you to do tonight is you don't have to get in an argument with anybody about who you're voting for, but just start talking about who you're voting for. Just let people know, here's what I'm doing. Here's why I'm voting for the people that I care about. Here's why I think they're the best leaders for our state. Because believe it or not, it's way more impactful for people if they read from something you post on Facebook or a phone call that you leave with them or a text message you send them. If you tell them your reasons for voting, that's a lot more persuasive than anything that Alicia or me or the other statewide candidates can say, any political ad they're going to see on television. Frankly, a lot of those things go in one ear and out the other because people know that a lot of times the ads they see are meant to sort of tilt things and tilt the truth, but they trust you and they believe you. And so I hope that you'll all leave here tonight once we've answered your questions, and you'll become our surrogates. You'll go out to your communities and your friends, and you'll share the message that Alicia and I both have, which is about restoring integrity to the government of the state of Missouri, helping to elect leaders like Alicia, like Nicole Galloway, like my good friend, my law school buddy, Yinka, who's running for Secretary of State. We've got so many important races in front of us and so much of an opportunity here that, frankly, if you told me in 2016 that things would look this good in 2020 for Democrats in the state of Missouri, I'm not sure I would have believed you. But that just means that we have to capitalize on this opportunity. We cannot sit there like a lot of people did. Sure, no one on this call did, but a lot of people did in 2016 and say, well, there's no way that this election can go badly for us. We've got this one in the bag. We feel that way now. We feel the blue wave coming, but we know we can't be complacent. We know that we have to keep our energy up these next 20 days, stay focused, talk to everyone we know, get our votes in, get our neighbors' votes in, get our friends' votes in, our family votes in. That's how we're going to turn things around in this state and all across the country. So really excited to be here tonight, really eager to answer your questions. And thanks so much again for having me. It's a nice little homecoming to get to talk to you all tonight.
All right. Thank you. I think we've got a couple of questions here. The first 2 questions will be posed to both of you. We'll just follow, we'll let Alicia go first so you can catch your breath there, Mr. Feinerman. During this campaign, what was the most surprising thing that you learned or was shared with you as you've gone through your campaigns in this cycle?
Most surprising. Well, I will say now at 7 months into this, I think everything has been surprising because this is not the typical campaign process. Couple of reasons I say that. This is my 3rd election. So I ran for city council, I ran for mayor, ran a very competitive race and just shy of making it through the primary. And now I'm running for statewide politics. So each time the field is getting much larger. The message is pretty consistent on what needs to happen. So I find that to be unique, that it doesn't matter whether I'm running for my council district of 80,000 people, citywide at 500,000 people, or statewide with 6 million people. The things that people want or that matter the most to them are the same. So that's been very surprising. I would say probably, so in that, for perspective, I have found it a lot easier to gain the confidence of voters. But because my campaign message is very much focused on delivering services and kind of fundamental, doing the basics, it doesn't always translate into the donor class who are looking for access for contracts and things like that. Like my opponent, like Mike Kehoe, has been able to garner. Most of his money comes from the donor class, but most of his work goes towards them too. So it's kind of a ebb and flow. But I do recognize that what it takes to be able to be effective in this space is a mix of both of those things, meaning your ability to be able to have the resources to engage your voters, as well as your ability to stay true to the things that matter to them that you're campaigning on. So what has been the most unique or the most challenging thing is to be able to convey that, because people are like, well, these are things I want, but we're saying, well, I need you to help me amplify this message, amplify this voice to get others who share these values to show up and vote. Because as I look at the data suggests that most of us are similar in mindset, regardless of party, right? But all of us are not showing up to vote and cast votes in line with our interests. So that's probably been the most frustrating thing, is to be able to get through this political rhetoric and get to the heart of the matter and get people engaged around these things, so we can put great leaders up like myself and Rich Finneran and Nicole Galloway and Yinka Fauti and Vicky England and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, because when you look at the things that really matter, this is where it starts. But Missouri is overwhelmingly rural. And you've got Kansas City, St. Louis, some of Springfield and Columbia that have the density to make the change to create the blue wave. We just have got to energize folks in these markets to get them to turn out in record numbers. And there's an amplification that comes along with that.
Thank you. Mr. Feinerman?
Yeah, so I agree with Alicia. This has been a very surprising campaign in a lot of ways. Obviously, none of us expected when we were getting into this that there would be a global pandemic going. Although I have to give Alicia credit, she actually got into this race after the pandemic started, so she knew something of what she was getting into. But the rest of us, we anticipated a year of traveling the state and meeting voters and talking to voters one-on-one. I had planned to spend only 1 week in St. Louis and 3 weeks out of every month somewhere else in the state. Hasn't been that way. Most of the campaign's been conducted out of my living room, like a lot of you are conducting your jobs today. And that's taken away from some of the joy of campaigning. But I'd say the things that probably have been surprising is how many important issues have come into my race. The Attorney General's race is not typically a race that you expect is going to be talking about something like healthcare. It's not an issue where that usually is within the Attorney General's purview. But my opponent, Eric Schmidt, keeps making it an important issue in this election by being on the wrong side of that issue. I think probably the other two most surprising days for me of the campaign were both things that Eric Schmidt did. I woke up one day in April thinking I was going to have a normal day of calling people on the phone and talking about how the pandemic was affecting them. And then suddenly I hear that Eric Schmidt has woken up that morning and decided to sue China over the pandemic. By that night, I'm on the evening news talking about it with Mike Bush and trying to explain why this lawsuit was going nowhere and why it wasn't going to recover a dime for the people of the state of Missouri. So that was one big surprise. And then maybe the other big surprise was the day that Kim Gardner brought charges in the McCloskey case, which I know is a very controversial case. Eric Schmidt decided to intervene in the case and ask the local judge to dismiss the case, something a sitting attorney general has never done, to attempt to undermine the authority of a local prosecutor. And then he, of course, doubled down on that by trying to push through the legislature a bill that would have actually usurped the jurisdiction of local prosecutors. So unfortunately, the things that have been surprising to me the most are the ways that my opponent has continued to use the Attorney General's office to further his political ambitions and to win political points, as opposed to fighting for the people of the state. So that's a unpleasant surprise. But I guess the pleasant surprise has been that despite the pandemic and despite all its challenges, I think both Alicia and I feel there's so much energy out there, so many people who want to get engaged. She and I did a town hall together, a virtual town hall back in the primary, and we had more than 1,000 people tune in for it. And that just tells you how much engagement and energy there is around these issues and how many people appreciate how important an election this is. So again, we can't give up, but just feeling that energy, even though we haven't been able to be in front of people, that's probably been the most pleasant surprise, I'd say, of the campaign.
All right, I'm just going to stay in the background here.
Okay.
Yeah, you can't put the cart before the horse, but obviously you're in this because you think there are important things that need to be done. What are the one or two things that you think will be the first things that you will tackle once you assume your office?
Lucy, do you want to go first or whatever you like?
Yeah, so as Lieutenant Governor, there are some obligations you have by Constitution, which is presiding over the Senate, and then being prepared to step up in the event the governor's not available. So obviously being ready, day one ready to be able to do those things effectively. From a policy standpoint, the Lieutenant Governor, you can go to my website, CandidyForMissouri.com. That's CADY, Kennedy for Missouri. And on this site, I talk about all the responsibilities of boards and commissions that the Lieutenant Governor advises: education, housing, economic development. I mentioned some of those things earlier on. I think the first thing that we have to do is to really do an assessment on where we are with our early childhood education policies. Right now, there's an initiative in St. Louis on how to fund early childhood education, because we understand that is an economic development tool, investing in that learning development at that level. Kansas City had a similar initiative in 2019, the year I was on the ballot for mayor, and it wasn't successful because of the funding mechanism. How do we take this knowledge that we know in the largest cities, Kansas City, St. Louis, about the broader impact and the return on investment of funding early child education and create a fair funding pattern for that statewide? So that's number one. Number two, I'm very interested in looking at affordable housing. We have to be able to put together a strategic plan to address the unmet need of affordable housing stock for workforce housing. We're seeing a number of people who are facing evictions that are stayed right now through the end of the year, but that's not going to be that way always. And what policy, what funding are we going to be able to put in place to be able to address the fallout that's going to come from that? There's going to be some opportunities as well for home ownership through the foreclosure process. People who right now can't afford the houses because of how inflated the housing market is, and some of them need to be prepared for home ownership opportunities as well. So you have to work to provide a safety net, and you also have to work to empower others for the opportunities that will come as a result of the fallout. And then third, and most importantly, we need to be able to work alongside with the governor on what the recovery is going to look like for COVID-19 and recovery for the economy. Until we have a mask mandate in place, I just feel like we're going to be playing whack-a-mole. So I'm really hoping that we get Nicole Galloway as governor so I can work alongside her. We share those values about our plan going forward and what the economic recovery would look like. And then we have to find ways to support these small businesses that have been impacted and to be able to preserve these jobs. So it's not one thing. We've got to be able to do all these things because we were already hurting in these areas before COVID-19 showed up. And so we have to be able to provide swift and efficient delivery of services and resources to these areas that are most impacted.
Well, I obviously agree with Alicia that those are all very important priorities for us to keep in mind. From a policy standpoint, as Attorney General, my role is a little more limited. My job is to enforce the law. And so there's sort of one set of things that I can do on day one to get us in shape on that. And then there's a longer term set of things that I'm going to start on day one, but it's going to take a long time for us to work on. So the first thing I'm going to do on day one is take the office's resources that are currently being dedicated to things like fighting this healthcare lawsuit, to things like suing China, and take those resources and eliminate those lawsuits, get out of these political quagmires that Eric Schmidt has put us into so that we can have the resources we need to start building back. So that's a day one priority is refocusing the resources on the core mission of the office of protecting the people in Missouri, whether that's consumer protection or violent crime or any of the other things that are affecting people in our state. That's where our priority has to be focused on day one. But the second thing I've got to do is I've got to work towards rebuilding the trust that people should have in their Attorney General's office. And that's a matter that's going to take a longer time to show the kind of integrity that people should be able to expect from their Attorney General. So one thing we are going to do on day one is we're going to take every sunshine request that our office receives, and we are going to publicize both the request and our response to that request on the website. So if you want to know something about how your government is operating, you don't have to send your own letter to get the information. If we've answered the question for somebody else, you can get that answer too. And people will be able to review that material publicly like they should have been able to all along. And if there's some reason that we can't provide some public record because, for example, we have a covert investigation going on and we are keeping it secret while we investigate a case, well, then you'll be able to see our response and you'll be able to know why it is that we're saying we can't release a certain kind of information. So that's part of creating transparency, but there's also a longer effort that we've got to undertake in terms of rebuilding trust with law enforcement, with local prosecutors, and with the communities that they police and that they serve and protect. So that's going to be a longer term project. I think Eric Schmidt has created antipathy with local prosecutors by his proposal to try to take over their jurisdiction. And my view on that is that if we're fighting amongst ourselves about who's going to get to handle a case, then we're not doing what we should be doing, which is fighting crime. And so I'm committed to building relationships across the state with local prosecutors, local law enforcement, to help them do their jobs effectively, and also to help them institute best practices and better trainings in order to hopefully prevent some of the improper conduct that we've seen in so many of these national headlines over the past several years on the part of police officers. We want to have police officers in our communities that are working with the communities to try to increase public safety. That's, I think, what we have in most of the state. But in some cases, we need better resources and better training. And we definitely need better relationships between law enforcement and state law enforcement at the Attorney General's level. So those are a few of my priorities. But the one thing I will say is that throughout my term as Attorney General, I'm going to keep my focus where it should be, which is on working to try and improve the lives of Missourians by keeping them safe and protecting them from people who might try to take away their rights, take away their livelihood, or take away their safety. And that's what I'm going to spend my entire time in office trying to do.
Wonderful. Again, this next question I'm going to ask of each of you, and you can answer it in turn again. And you're right, it's divisive out there. There's a lot of political animosity. How, when you assume your office, will you try to bridge the gap, encouraged by bipartisanship, try to find areas of mutual agreement and to build, positively going forward?
Alicia, you want to go first?
So Mike, is the question, what is the approach? Is that the question?
What is your approach to it? What do you think, what will be your style or will be your way of helping to find common ground, to reach out to people of the opposite party, to basically try and calm down some of this divisiveness that's currently shaking not just local communities, but the state and the nation? How do we sort of bring some of this stuff back?
Well, I think part of it is that we have to keep the main thing. What does that mean? That means that we have to be clear on what are the needs and interests of the voters. Coming from serving at the local level, at the municipal level, and I've represented the Kansas City Council is the largest municipality in the state of Missouri. And so in that regard, you have very diverse interests, right? The people, even though it was a nonpartisan position, many of my colleagues were very far left and some were very far right. But our job was to work together on how do we meet the needs of our constituents, regardless of our political leaning. So one thing was clear was the outcomes that we needed. So we had prioritization of, citizens' expectations based on surveys that we did. And then from there, we had to figure out what was the means to the end, how we're going to get there. It was always money was the biggest challenge. Where we're going to cut from to try to accomplish this. And I imagine it'd be the same with the state. But I believe the biggest opportunity and the greatest lessons that I brought forward from that was that we can be agreeable on the outcomes, but be flexible on the strategies on how we get there. Because there were some strategies that some of my conservative colleagues that put forth were more effective than some of the others. And it wasn't because they were conservative, it was because they had experience in this area, or because they just, had a good idea. And so I think that one of the biggest opportunities that we have is to be clear about being intentional about working on what we could agree on. As a Democrat lieutenant governor in a Republican majority Senate, even though I would preside over it, it will definitely require me to have broad relationships with people. But all Republicans aren't alike, just like all Democrats aren't alike, which is why Governor Parson wasn't able to kind of ram through that legislation to try to override the elected prosecutor, Kim Gardner, to try to override her authority, because his colleagues didn't support it. Prosecutors from around the state of broad political affiliations didn't support it. So I think those are examples of how people are very clear on what policy should be, whether it's partisan or not, and then just being flexible on how we're going to kind of massage it. Sometimes the solution is timing. Sometimes the political climate is such that you're not going to be able to get it through, because people who would be supportive for political reasons, may not be willing to be supportive. And so sometimes the solution is timing. Sometimes the solution is relationships, and sometimes the solution is leverage. Who are the special interest groups that it can get to these people to get them to yes? And you have to be willing to operate flexibly between all three: timing, relationships, and leveraging, and whatever else it takes, and strong advocacy to be able to get the outcomes that are much needed. But I believe at the core of all of it is civility. We can disagree, but let's not be disagreeable with each other. Let's not be disrespectful of each other. Some of these political ads I'm seeing from Governor Parsons towards Nicole Galloway, who is, one of the most hardworking politicians that I've met. And it's not civil. They're lies. And it's deplorable in a lot of ways. And we've seen this at the national level as well. But we've got to get back to a place of being focused on the main things. And that's what matters most to most Missourians.
Well, yeah, I think, again, Alysia has spoken very eloquently about what we need to do on the political side of things in order to try to promote bipartisanship. As the Attorney General, to me, it's not as much about bipartisanship, because I don't act as a legislator. It's about being nonpartisan. It's about not letting the Attorney General's office be the sort of thing that is pursuing only Democratic objectives. I don't think it's my job to be the Democratic version of Eric Schmidt and use people's tax dollars in Missouri to pursue policies they didn't vote for. I think my job is to protect and serve everybody across the state of Missouri. And so one thing that I think I can do to help to achieve the sort of climate that Alysia is talking about is just make sure everybody knows that whether they're a Democrat or a Republican, no matter who they voted for in the last election, definitely regardless of whether they supported my campaign or not, they'll get a fair shake if they have to come before the Attorney General's office. And again, I'm going to have a nonpartisan test for how I decide whether or not to pursue a lawsuit on behalf of the people of the state of Missouri. And that is, doing this lawsuit going to do anything to protect the people in this state? I will tell you that one place, though, where I do think I do have a role in encouraging bipartisanship is something that I know we're going to talk about as we go on tonight, which is the importance of protecting clean Missouri. Voting no on 3 is maybe the most important vote that you're going to cast in this election, which is crazy to say because there's so many important things on the ballot this November. But if we don't keep clean Missouri intact, then we're just going to be inviting the Republican-controlled legislature to create even more dramatically gerrymandered districts than we have today. And that has huge consequences for bipartisanship in Jefferson City. Because if legislators are all sitting in comfortably blue or comfortably red districts, they've got no incentive to cross the aisle and work together with the other party, because the only thing that can make them not be there the next term is if they lose a primary. They don't have to worry about a general election because they don't face a challenge because they don't have a competitive district. Clean Missouri is supposed to solve that. It's supposed to give the decision of how to draw those lines to a nonpartisan demographer who is going to look at competitiveness and fairness and use that as the criteria to draw districts. If we can keep that reform intact and require there to be those fair and competitive districts, then we're going to see races all across all across the state where people are going to be competing, Democrat and Republican, for people's votes. And when that happens, it's going to put pressure on legislators to actually work together and cross the aisle. So I hope that you will all remember to vote no on 3, and our state will uphold Clean Missouri in November. But even if we do, I can tell you where the next fight is going to be. It's going to be in the courtroom. Republicans are going to try to challenge Clean Missouri on constitutional grounds or other grounds and say that it's not permitted under federal constitutional law or Missouri constitutional law. And that's why you need to have an attorney general like myself who believes in democracy, who believes in protecting people's votes, who believes in promoting competitiveness and fairness in our districts, so that I will be in court defending that law, unlike Eric Schmidt, who has been in court defending the misleading ballot language that we now see on our ballots that is going to potentially undermine those reforms if we don't vote no on 3 when we get to November. So that's probably the biggest thing that I can do to promote bipartisanship, is defend the gains that we made in Clean Missouri in 2018, and that I hope we'll keep intact here by voting no on 3. That's something that I can definitely do from my position as Attorney General.
Okay. That's a good lead into this question. I'm going to skip down the list here a little bit. We're all going to be optimistic that Clean Missouri will stay in force. No on 3 will be successful. With that gerrymandering out of the way, what would you say to people in the community, on the audience tonight, or people who may watch this on a YouTube video later, who might have an interest in serving in an office, either at a local level, state level, or national level? What words of advice or encouragement or insights would you give to them, so that maybe we can have more candidates even 2 years from now?
Yeah, well, I'll start with that one. So I would say, first of all, give me a call. I intend to be very engaged after November in trying to continue to build the bench of candidates for Democrats here in Missouri. I think it's really important, especially after the devastation we saw in 2016, that we start building our party from the ground up, not just at the statewide level, but at the local level, at the district level, cities, counties. All those offices are so important to start building the sort of leaders that we're going to need as we move into this next era in Missouri politics. I'll tell you that if you give me a call and talk to me, I'll be very honest with you. It's not easy to run for office. This is my first time as a candidate. I thought by working on Court's campaign as intensely as I did that I had a pretty good sense of what I was getting myself into. Obviously, no one foresaw that we were going to have a pandemic in the midst of it, but it's still just a different experience being a candidate. You have to be able to put aside so much else in your life and stay laser focused on trying to win an election, because there really is so much at stake for all of us in just even one race like mine. It's challenging, but it's also really, really rewarding. You get to meet amazing people over the course of the time that you're running. You feel like you're doing something important every single day. And the hope is that you will then be successful in your election and you will be able to actually deliver some positive change for people in the state of Missouri. I will say we make it harder for people to run for office than we should. It's a very confusing process at the very beginning to get all your paperwork in order and set up your bank accounts and set up your domain name and all things you have to do. So one thing I'm going to be really focused on after this election is something to make it easier for first-time candidates who are interested in serving the public in getting started, because sometimes you just need that initial push. And then once you've got that, it's really marching forward to the end. So if you are interested in running for office, which I'm sure there are people on this call who are thinking about it, whether it's a big office or a small one, they're all hugely important. And we need some of those people who are watching tonight to step up as new leaders in this state. So, go to my website, emails at the bottom, info@richfinneran.com, and let me know that you want to know more about that. And as soon as we get through November, you'll be getting a call from me and we can start talking.
Thank you. Lisa, do you have anything to add to that?
Not really. I think Rich summed it up very nicely.
All right.
We're on the same page on a lot of things. So
This one may go more to Rich. And you brought up the attorney generals that are trying to overturn the Affordable Care Act. What will be your policy or practice on working with your peers in other states on issues like that going forward?
So that's a very good question, and a common thing that does happen is that sometimes attorneys general across the country will work together on lawsuits that can be brought to help the people in their states. A great example of that is the litigation over the opioid crisis, where Missouri is one of 48 states that are all working together to try to hold pharmaceutical companies and others accountable and recover money for the people in their own states. That passes my test of being something about trying to protect and serve the people of the state of Missouri. So that's the kind of lawsuit I would get involved in, the one where there's broad bipartisan support across Republican and Democratic AG's offices, where we are really working together to try to serve the people of the state. But if I can't answer that question, if a lawsuit doesn't pass that test, I don't care if there's 10 Democratic AGs involved in it and no Republican AGs involved in it. It's not a good use of Missouri taxpayer dollars. So that's how I view it. I'm always going to ask myself that question before I get involved in any case like that. But as sort of Alicia was saying, if the Republican AGs are leading the charge on something that is important to the people in our state, I won't hesitate to join that lawsuit either. I don't think these should be partisan questions. I think these are things that we should be all looking at from a nonpartisan place of integrity to try to say, what is it that this is doing to help people in my state? If I can answer that question, I'm happy to lend the resources of my office to those efforts. If I can't, then I don't think it's a good use of your taxpayer dollars. And that's how I approach all those issues.
Okay. We're closing in on 8 o'clock. We will not go past 8:30. So if you have more questions, please get them sent in or raise your hand. This one came in specifically for you, Rich, and I'm just going to read it word for word. As Attorney General, will you advocate for criminal justice reform policy that focuses on cases like Bobby Bostic's case, who was sentenced to 241 years as a 16-year-old for a robbery? Is that
Yes.
something?
Yes, and I think sometimes people are surprised when someone with my background as a former prosecutor, and actually Alicia and Yinka are also former prosecutors, that I am an advocate for criminal justice reform, because having been inside the system, I know that the system is not perfect and the system does make mistakes. And where there are those sorts of mistakes, it's our obligation as prosecutors to correct them. And that is one place where Eric Schmidt has failed us. You mentioned the Bostic case, but another example of this is the case of Lamar Johnson, a person who was convicted by the circuit attorney more than 20 years ago for a crime that we all now know he did not commit. Others have confessed to the crime, and there's evidence that, in fact, an informant was paid off by the police officers to implicate him, and that was not disclosed to him in the course of the trial, which makes his conviction an unconstitutional conviction. And when, as a prosecutor, you find out that your office, even if it wasn't your fault, if your office has engaged in some unconstitutional conduct and an innocent man is sitting in jail, then you should move heaven and earth to try to correct that error, because no prosecutor wants to put innocent people in jail, and certainly no one wants to keep them in jail once we know that they're innocent. But what happened in this case is that our circuit attorney filed a motion, said a mistake was made. We're asking this man be granted a new trial after he's been sitting in prison for 25 years. To my surprise, Eric Schmidt came in and opposed the prosecutor's motion and said because of a technicality that since he didn't know about this evidence, he didn't file his motion within the 15 days required of him 25 years ago, that there was no remedy available to him, despite the fact that other prosecutors across the state have used the same mechanism to secure the release of innocent people in other cases. And that's something that I really just find atrocious and egregious and an insult to our system of justice. And I said it in an editorial I wrote in the American, St. Louis American, back in December of last year, where I called on Eric Schmidt to reverse his position in this case, because frankly, I don't think this should be a political issue. I don't think I should have to be talking during a campaign about whether or not innocent people should be kept in jail. But that's what Eric Schmidt thinks, at least in this one particular case. And I think that he needs to reverse course on that. I would much rather he just take this issue off the table and let this man have his life back. But again, because of what he's done in his office, he forces us to talk about it. That's just one example of how our system makes mistakes, commits errors. And we have to find people who are willing to take on that reality and work on finding practices and procedures, policies and training that will help to eliminate some of those challenges in our system. It's a long road. It's not something that I can promise anybody I'll be able to accomplish overnight, but it's something that I firmly and deeply believe in. And I want to work with local prosecutors, with local law enforcement to bring some of that training, bring some of those best practices that I learned at the federal level to the local level so that we can solve some of these problems in the short term and work towards reforming our system in the long term. So I am an advocate for criminal justice reform, and it's something that I will be an advocate for as Attorney General.
Thank you. At that point, other than some comments about everybody doing a wonderful job and appreciating you coming out and talking to us tonight, we have cleared all the questions and answers and comments. So I will let each of you, just have sort of some closing remarks. If you want to say something to those in the audience and future YouTube watchers in the future, as we get ready to wrap up tonight's program.
Well, let's see, I've been talking for a while. You want to go first?
I would just say I'm so thankful that there is an audience that is paying attention to what's happening in this political cycle. So much has happened in the last 6 or 7 months. We've had COVID-19. We've had kids been out of school. We've been sheltered in place. People have experienced economic hardship and healthcare scares. So much has happened, but still, you guys are finding time in the midst of all that to learn more about who wants to represent you, and that means a lot to me. Everyone is not as judicious about this information. So it's so important that you guys take the time to share the information we talked about today, share our platform, share our social media pages, share this video, because sometimes the only voice they're going to get of true information is what you tell them. And so what we are praying that does not happen is that we have a repeat of 2016, where 4 out of 10 people stayed at home. We can't afford that. Too much is at stake. We've talked about those things. I got in this race, as Rich said, against my better judgment. At the 11th hour, for a race that others had a year to prepare for, I had 30 days. I got into it knowing that we were headed into a pandemic, but I understood the urgency, because if we did not have someone who was culturally competent, that was going to speak on those issues that affect those who are already disadvantaged, they were going to be further behind. Just like those that are facing eviction, just like our kids that are dealing with the digital divide, those that were already reading behind grade level and are at home studying by themselves because their parents can't work from home. Those are the people who I'm looking to be a voice for in this political cycle, to make sure that we have an equitable Missouri, that all of our kids have a chance to succeed, that every family that wants to earn a decent wage and live in a nice home and be productive members of society have the ability to do that. That everyone has access to affordable health care, and that everyone has leadership that they can rely on and depend on that's going to be responsive to their needs. Can't say that we're going to be able to answer all of them because we've got a budget deficit we've got to deal with, but at least be responsive to the things that are most important. And so we have a good slate of options to consider this election cycle. And I just encourage you guys to stay engaged, stay in the fight with us. November the 3rd is just kind of the round one. Governing is a whole lot harder than politicking. Rich will find that out after he wins. Politicking is hard, but governing is a whole lot harder, because we have to be able to provide solutions and resources. But with your help, with your support and your commitment, we can do this. When we show up, and when I say we, meaning those folks in Missouri that want the best for Missouri, when we show up and we vote our interests, we win. And I'm looking forward to a win on November the 3rd. Thank you, guys.
Well, and I just want to, of course, echo what Alicia just said. I mean, it is such a privilege and an honor to be your Democratic nominee for Attorney General, and it's a responsibility that I take very seriously. That I'm out here trying to represent your interests, trying to fight for you, trying to make sure that we have an Attorney General's office that cares about the people in this state, that is committed to restoring integrity to our state. And I'm just so grateful to be having people like Alicia running alongside me. I know she said it was against her better judgment, but I think it was a pretty good call because she is an amazing candidate for lieutenant governor. And I think she is helping to change the image, frankly, that a lot of people, I think, have of what the Democratic Party is in this state. We've been going out to rural areas of the state. We were in Raleigh together the other day, just trying to spread the message of good government and integrity in a way that really appeals to people regardless of what their political background is. And I really do think that we have made an amazing amount of progress in a very short period of time. And we just need you to stick with us for the next 20 days so we can get across this finish line. But as Lucia said, that's not the end of the race. There's going to be so many more challenges ahead of us once we get back into power. And we also have to elect people to the legislature once we get those maps fixed through Clean Missouri. So I know that you're here tonight because you care about these issues. You're here because you want to see change in your government. You want to have a government that you can trust and believe in. I hope that you know that Alicia and I are committed to that same objective and that we're going to do everything in our power these next 20 days to achieve it. I hope that you'll do the same and that you'll be with us after November 3rd when the real fun begins as we start trying to get this state back on the right track. So Mike and Kathy, thank you again so much for having us. I've really, really enjoyed having this conversation tonight. And I hope that when the pandemic is all over, we can have another one in person.
Thank you. Thank you, Alicia. Thank you, Rich, for all your time tonight, your comments, your insights. I know our audience is appreciative of them. And thank you to the audience for taking time out of your evening to join us tonight. It's an important cause. It's an important time. And we do all need to stay involved. If you have not yet voted, please remember to plan your vote. If you have the capability or the option to vote early, I personally am encouraging people to do that. I have actually already cast all my votes. I think you can probably figure out where they went, but I will tell you that it was a very organized, well-controlled process. I felt very safe voting in person but early. So with that, we're going to wrap up tonight's meeting, and we look forward to seeing you all again on November 10th. And we'll see what happens over the next 3 weeks. So good luck to all of our candidates tonight, and everyone, please be safe.
Thank you all. Vote no on 3.